Alright guys, so ice fishing season is almost here. I am excited. I am excited to wake up before I would for work, walk probably a mile through knee-deep snow, set up a little tiny tent, hang out with my buddy alone for hours in the road, we play with rods. I'm excited. Are you excited? I bet you're excited. Now the thing with getting excited is we go out maybe before we should. I'm guilty of it too, but we shouldn't be guilty of it. Now I tried to find those statistics here to let you know, and the statistics I found that between 7 and 56 people a year go out ice fishing and don't make it back. And that is an oddly sad truth. And the other sad truth is that the one piece of equipment that you need that could really save you in those situations, well, a lot of times that costs more than a rod and reel. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make an ice spud for under 20 bucks. And all you need is some basic tools. Let's get dusty. So I'm actually going to show you two different ways to make a very cheap ice spud. Both these spuds are going to be under $20 to make. The first one I'm going to show you, the only tools you need is you're going to need a couple of wrenches. What size wrenches? That's going to depend on what size bolts you have laying around the house. You're also going to need an angle grinder and a drill. That's going to be it for the first one. So we'll talk about the first one first because it's going to be the most simple, basic one. The first thing that you're going to want to do is run to the store. I chose Menards. It's where I bought everything from. So when I tell you these prices, it's from Menards. And you can actually get this at 11% rebate, which will be cheaper than your total final price. First thing I have is a piece of 1/2-inch black pipe. It's 48 inches long. Go longer if you want. Go shorter if you want. I went with 48 inches because when you're all said and done, it's going to give me a nice solid stance. So 1/2-inch black pipe, that was $10.36 for the pipe. That's your biggest expense. Second thing you're going to need is you're going to need a tee. This is a 1/2-inch tee all the way around. That was $1.49 at Menards. And then the third final thing you need is a cheap pry bar. You might have one laying around that you don't care about. This was at Menards for $4.99. Out the door, this first spud cost us $17.41 out the door after tax, not including the 11% rebate, so it was actually cheaper. And let's start building that one right now. Your first and most complicated step, you're going to take your pipe, take your tee, and just get it on there, nice and tight. If you want to use Loctite, if you want to use pipe dope, whatever you want to do, there you go. So now you have a nice handle that you can beat on without sticking into your hand. That's step one. Step two, a little more complicated. Step two, take your pry bar in your vise. You want to try to straighten it out as much as possible. You don't actually probably have to do this, but I think it's going to be a little simpler if you do it. Because I realized I didn't say the vise on tools you're going to need. Alright, so we're just trying to get this to be a little bit flatter. It probably really doesn't matter a whole lot. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get it flat, because we're going to want to cut right above that hole. Because we're going to actually use that hole to mount this into the pipe. So if this flatter you can get it, the better. That's probably alright. I'm just going to cut it right above that hole. Keep in mind this is a hardened steel or a carbon steel. It's going to suck to cut through a little bit, and even more to drill through. That's why we're doing this way. While that cools off on the floor, we'll grab the pipe. Alright, so what you're going to do with this pipe right here is you can see that you have it laying flat here. And this really, you don't have to do it. I'm just doing it because it lays and transports better. Is you're going to want to have the actual chisel point that will match this exact flatness. You understand what I'm saying? Let me show you. Let me get that hot piece off the ground. Oh man. Whoever keeps moving the floor farther down, not funny. You want this thing to lay flat like this, right? Like you want everything to be on the same plane. If you flip this 90 degrees, when you try to transport it, it's going to rock a little bit. It doesn't matter a whole lot, but I'm just telling you this little trick here. So what we're going to do next though, is once you have the exact way you want it, is we're going to take this pipe and you're going to do this, right? We're going to slit this down. So we want to slit this down far enough that we can get a bolt through this hole. So we're going to slit on both sides with the angle grinder, set this thing down, and then we'll drill a hole through this, and then we'll be able to do it that way. That's what we're doing. That way this is what you're actually using to chisel on the ice. You don't want to go down too far because you don't want when you're hitting for that shear strength to all be on that bolt. Because if you leave the shoulders of that slit right there, when you actually pound this down, this part will hit those shoulders and you'll take a lot less stress off of that off that bolt, and you won't be putting all that shear on there. Just a little fun fact on that. So let's we're gonna cut these strips down the side so we can fit this boy in here. Now to try to get this slot out, I just hit it real quick with the grinder to give it kind of a weak point that I can bend it. Now take one of your wrenches that you're going to use later on. I would use pliers, but I didn't tell you pliers, so we're going to use the wrench because it should work. You're going to pry that out. Probably use your fingers, but I didn't want to get burnt and or cut. You want to try to leave this tight enough that it's not going to leave a bunch of wiggle room for everything. Alright, so there you go. We're out like a Cub Scout. Now if we did this right, this should slip in there. I gotta take just a little bit off of the side, which is kind of ideal. You don't want, you know, I'd rather it be too tight and have to go back in than it be too loose. But we're gonna just open this up so I can slide this all the way down. Now, once you got the thing where it slides nice and in there and down to the depth that you want, take it out, bring it to that depth, then mark here and drill a hole. I drilled this hole already on this side. But you're gonna drill all the way through so that you can slide this in and get a bolt through. So your hole size is going to be determined by whatever bolts you have laying around. I'm assuming that you have a bolt laying around your house. If you don't, you'll have to buy a bolt, but I just assume someone somewhere will have a bolt. I have a 1/4 inch bolt that we're going to do. So all you're going to do now is you drop your tool part in there, push this guy through, nut on the back. Then you're going to use those wrenches I told you about earlier to tighten these things up. Again, now this is where it comes in really handy to have those shoulders be the correct width, because having only one bolt in here, this thing will have a tendency to try to pivot on that axis. So if you got those shoulders to be perfect and really nice, it'll help keep it from shifting that way. Or if you want, you can always just drill right through and put another hole in there, but then you're trying to drill through this hardened steel. And as I found out earlier, that really sucks. But get them nice and tight. If you want, you can use thread lock, whatever, to make sure that this bolt doesn't come out loose, but yeah. Just like that, that is the simplest ice Spud I think you can probably make, and it's $17, and you make it with a drill and a grinder. And a vise if you want to be, but you don't really need the vise, but it's very handy to have. So obviously you'll just jam this into the ice, and that's really all you need. Have the right bits and everything you want to drill through this, you can technically cut this thing up and make more if you wanted to. Let's talk about the more difficult one to make now. So the second one that we're going to do, it's going to require you to have a welder and a grinder, preferably a bench grinder. A regular grinder will do the trick. So what we're going to use on this one is we're going to do the same thing. Now I bought 1/2 inch. I have the same 1/2 inch black pipe that I just used. I actually took that thing off there for spoiler alerts, but so it's got the same 48 inch 1/2 inch pipe with the 1/2 inch T. Now, if you're going to do it this way, I would you go 3/4. I went 1/2, and then you'll see why that was a mistake in a second. You also, if you want, we're going to weld in this portion. Realistically, the last one that we built, you could, instead of putting the bolt, just weld that piece in, and you're going to be about the same place as we are now. But, so you're going to need a T pipe. Again, I'd go 3/4 because it would make it easier on this one. And then you're going to need a 6-inch masonry chisel from Harbor Freight. Now this one is a little more expensive because you used a chisel. I think the chisel is going to overall be a little more durable. It's a lot more heavy duty for hitting. It's a chisel compared to a pry bar. But here we are, right? Honestly, the chisel was my first choice, and then I couldn't drill through it, so here's where we're at. So, again, the pipe, $10.36, the T, $1.49. The chisel was $1 more expensive than the pry bar. Chisel was $5.99 at Harbor Freight. So now you got to jump to 2 different stores here. So then you can make this one for $18.47 out the door. Unless you want to go 3/4 with the piping, and then it's an extra $3.80. So that's whatever that math equals out to be. So what we're going to do, this first step in the last one, first step in this one, get that T on there. But we want to take that chisel, and I can take the price tag off now. You want to take that chisel and you want to be able to shove it in the end of that pipe. So what we're going to do is I'll probably end up cutting this section off right here, and then I'm just going to go around with an angle grinder until it's able to slide in. And so your next step is to take that chisel and do this. Is to grind down this whole thing so that it will slide at the end of your pipe. Yeah, so if you do a 3/4 inch pipe, you won't have to grind as much off, which is way easier than grinding this thing down so it fits inside this 1/2 inch tube. But once you got this thing in, what you want to do is you want to, again, line up your T so it's in line here, because that way it just seems to be more, I like it better that way. That's why I keep telling you to do it, right? They're both running on the same plane, just about there. So once you have that in, now what we're going to do is we're going to tack weld the T on, so the T can't screw around anymore, and then we're going to weld on the chisel. Again, you want to get this thing to drive inside there, because I think if you just try to cut it and just butt joint it, I don't think it's going to be that strong over time whacking it on the ice. I think this will be a lot stronger of a weld. If you want to just butt joint weld it, go ahead. I don't know how well it's going to do, but there you are. So I'm going to fire up the welder. We're going to weld this bad boy up. There it is. 2 simple ways to make a spud. This one you need a welder and a grinder, maybe a bench grinder. The other one, you just need a grinder and a drill. You can make these for under 20 bucks. Online they're going between 75 and 90 bucks. You can't really get a rod and reel for under 20 bucks anymore. So this will save your life, and now you have no excuse to not do it. It's a good project to do if you're just itching to get out on the ice. You want to do something related to ice fishing, there you go. On my spud, I actually took a piece of paracord and I went through here just so that my hand, it's there. Like, it just wraps around my hand, keeps my hand on there so I don't ever lose this thing when I'm going to roll around. Now, if you're an OG to the channel, you'll know that I actually did a video on making an ice spud like 4 years ago. But I'm a lot more comfortable in front of the camera now. My welding skills have sort of improved. And I wanted to break this one down and show you guys really easily how to do this, because I do think this is extremely important, and I think that we take this kind of stuff for granted, again, especially when the fact that you're looking at 85, 90 bucks to buy a spud, and you can go buy a rod and reel for 30 bucks. I know why it gets overlooked, but I don't think it should. So with that being said, on that somber note, if you catch a lot of fish this year, you could let me know. I love hearing fishing stories. I hope you catch a monster walleye, a huge pike, and an absolute crap ton of crappie and bluegill and perch and whatever else you're fishing for. I hope you have a great time. I hope you stay safe. And you know what? I hope you come back for another video. We'll see you in the next one.